Hello and welcome to South Asia Focus. I am Smita Prakash. This week we have with us expert on Southeast Asian affairs, Professor Srikanth Kondapalli, who will speak to us about the recent visit of Chinese President Xi Jinping to India and the future of India-China trade relations and whether the two nations will be able to resolve the boundary disputes. But first, here's a brief roundup of President Xi's India visit.
Chinese President Xi Jinping, accompanied by his wife, arrived in India for a three-day visit on September 17th, aiming to create better cooperation between the two nations. In a departure from the past, Prime Minister Narendra Modi received Xi Jinping at Ahmedabad, a city which has never hosted a head of state, a move which signified the beginning of regional diplomacy. The two sides were able to agree on investments aimed at extensively upgrading their commercial association, with China pledging $20 billion for industrial parks and infrastructure including railway technology. However, a recent standoff between India and Chinese soldiers on the line of actual control, or the LAC, the de facto border, overshadowed Xi's visit towards the end. Both sides though pledged to resolve all disputes and maintain peace at the border. During his visit, Xi also said China would support India becoming a full member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and also supported India's ambition to play a greater role at the United Nations, including on the Security Council.
Thank you for speaking with us. I'd like to begin by asking that what is, in your opinion, the overall picture after this visit? Because one had heard that there's going to be 100 billion in investments in the next 5 years, and then that came down to 30 billion. There was the border incursions, and this all during the visit. It began on this high note, personal vibes between Indian Prime Minister and the Chinese President, and then it seemed to all unravel towards the second and the third day. In the overall scenario, do you think it was an underwhelming experience at all?
I think a lot of drama must have gone into the whole interactions. There were very high expectations. When President Xi Jinping came to India, he proposed, and it is conveyed to the Ministry of External Affairs and various other bodies. His pet project was the Maritime Silk Road. And surprisingly, the joint statement doesn't mention anything, nor the Prime Minister's press statement doesn't say anything about the Maritime Silk Road. So he was possibly disappointed with the kind of outcome in the whole visit.
Who was disappointed? Was it the President Jinping?
That's right.
Okay.
President Xi Jinping must have been disappointed because there was no endorsement of the Maritime Silk Road. Obviously, the Chinese also did not give what are the building blocks of the Maritime Silk Road, whether this will be purely in the maritime economy, maritime resources, maritime transportation and so on, or it will have any military connotations.
But before the Silk Route came, before even President Xi Jinping came here, there was the Moslem Project, which was literally like a badminton thing, the shuttlecock thrown from this end and there was this thrown from the other end. So really, did one expect the Silk Route thing to go through at all?
Well, this January, during the Special Representatives meeting, the idea was proposed to India, and it was done in a very innocuous way. In fact, India was surprised with the kind of initiative that China proposed. If we look at the July 14th meeting between Xi Jinping and Modi in Fort Eliza as part of the BRICS meeting,
Sideline of the BRICS Summit,
Sidelines of the BRICS Summit meeting in Brazil, he had stated that number one, he would like to have the Maritime Silk Road. Number two, the BCIM economic corridor, Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar economic corridor, that he wanted the Indian cooperation in this. Thirdly, he had suggested that India should join, China suggested that India should join the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. But none of these things have come up in the statement except for the BCIM concept, in which the Prime Minister also made in the media coverage yesterday, Prime Minister Modi, in which he suggested to a conditional acceptance of the BCIM concept, meaning if that provides for security environment, if that augurs well for the security environment, meaning thereby that actually he must have been suggesting that since Northeast India has a lot of insurgency, and if BCIM, which is going to impact that region, will have any adverse impact on the insurgency in the northeast of India, then possibly India will back off from the BCIM initiative.
In this visit, the focus was going to be on trade and investment, with the new government's focus to be to put the economy back on rails. Cooperation with China is central to that. Cooperation with China and Japan, I would say, is central to that. So the focus was going to be on trade and investment, everybody thought. Do you think that any forward movement has taken place on that? Yes, there had been 16, I think, agreements signed, but it ranged more in like MOU format, you know. So do you think that it's gone forward in positively on trade and investment?
I think so. There were some serious discussions related to economy. It may not have appeared in the fine print, but I think there is some substantial cooperation in the economic field. Time and again, Prime Minister Modi raised the issue of trade imbalance and the need for China to open up its market for Indian goods.
Yeah, that's like it says that 10 years ago, India exported more to China than it imported, and now it exports less than half. Do you think that China will actually open up? I mean, it's different, Mr. Modi saying open up your pharma and things. Do you think China is willing to open up its markets to India?
So far, the indicators are that they will not. And if they hold on for one more year of not opening up their market, under the WTO rules, they can get away with that. And the RCEP, which is an initiative in Southeast Asia, in which China and India are also planning to join, if the Chinese resist the opening up of their economy till the next year, till 2015, 2016, then I think they need not worry about any of the pressures, not just from India actually, from the United States, from Europe, from Japan, from Korea, South Korea, Singapore, and so on and so forth.
So you don't see this balance being incorrected in the near future?
Absolutely. In fact, India lost $169 billion from 2007 to 2013. And last year, India lost $33 billion in terms of trade deficits. Of course, the Chinese will say that we are exporting more manufacturing goods to the Indian market, and the Indians are exporting only raw materials like iron ore and so on and so forth. But this also is a specious argument, because UNCTAD suggests that the Indian manufacturing sector is 9th in the scale of the global manufacturing prowess. So it is not fair on the part of China to suggest that India cannot export manufacturing goods to China. So India actually has the capability, but the problem was that the market economy status has not been fully implemented in China.
Let's move to the border issue. Why did the PLA have to choose this time to make these incursions into Indian territory? Was it deliberate, you think?
It is not clear.
It certainly cast a shadow over the entire visit. After the first day, you know, look at the optics, if nothing else. You know, you have the Indian Prime Minister and the Chinese President sitting on a swing and watching a cultural program, and on the other hand, you have troops which have come in into the border. Certainly, it's cast a shadow on the entire visit. And after 10 years, you have a Chinese presidential visit, and what will it be remembered for? It will be remembered for the border incursion, not for anything else.
Indeed, this is a key problem in the bilateral relations, that both the nations so far in the last 60 odd years tried to do everything at the multilateral level, bilateral level, without actually defining where their respective jurisdictions run through. This is the key problem in the bilateral relations. No one wants to touch this issue of line of actual control, definition, demarcation, delimitation. And this is the key problem, and this will recur even if Prime Minister Modi is in Beijing. That is because almost on an everyday basis there is a transgression in the line of actual control.
But President Xi said that the problem is more in the nature of, it's not incursion, and he said it's transgression. That's the term, because it's not demarcated. But how long will it take? It's since I think 2013 that 2000. When was the special representatives put up for?
In 2005, the special representative.
So since then, we've been talking about demarcating the border. That's not happening. They're building roads, bridges. You have now even the civilians now camped, at an eyeball to eyeball level. So where does this go? It's escalating. It doesn't seem to be any de-escalation out there.
Well, actually, the situation on the ground is that the intentional transgressions are much more lethal than the unintentional transgressions, meaning patrols moving without their knowledge. And please imagine that this area is about 3,000 to 5,000 meters above sea level, minus 30 degrees centigrade temperatures. So
it's very intentional then. There's no way that an unintentional thing can happen there, isn't it?
Because most of these patrols do not have GPS, do not sometimes even have mobile phones. It is quite natural under, say, natural
Choppers
disasters.
Choppers have moved in and dropped food packets for their soldiers. So it is intentional.
In this area, it is intentional. What I was suggesting is that across the 4,000 odd kilometers, there are areas where it is unintentional. What I was trying to suggest is that the lethal intentional transgressions are more problematic in the bilateral relations. And this incident is actually intentional, because about 6-7 years ago, the incident that happened in Chumar, which is roughly to the northeast of Himachal Pradesh.
Those sheds which were built and then the sheds were pulled down. Yeah.
This place never witnessed PLA transgressions before. But for the last 6-7 years, they have been moving in and conveying a message to the Indian side that we have a claim in this area. So this is generally called extended claim area. Basically, someone wakes up suddenly and say, hey, I have a claim for this region. So this is the key problematic.
Their road, those who are building the road out there say that they can go into an area called, a village called Tible or Tibble, which is 5 kilometers into Indian territory. Now, 5 kilometers is clearly now there's a demarcation. You can't have an area which is 5 kilometers into another country and say that this is not demarcated.
Indeed. In fact, the ITBP, Indo-Tibetan Border Police personnel, are not allowed into these regions. Sometimes they cannot carry even their weapons. So they cannot even go in uniforms. They have to go in a civilian dress into these areas. So it is actually problematic, because China is trying to assert its claim in this region, and more concertedly, and it's a very brazen way, especially during the chairman of the Central Military Commission, when he is in New Delhi. Such an incident has to happen in the last 2-3 days.
So how do you see this partnership between China and India? Is it possible at all when you have trouble at the border? At the boundary in such a large scale, and then it's so specific out here right now?
Actually, in 1988, when Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi visited China, they decided.
1988. Yes, I remember clearly that. Yes.
During that time, it was decided that let us forget about the territorial dispute resolution. This has become very complicated. We cannot solve this problem in one generation. So both sides suggested, let's look at the economic issues, let's look at cultural relations, let's normalize the diplomatic relations by setting up consul generals, consulates across cities, and expanded format of bilateral interaction. Now, from 1988 till now, we both
it's
China
been a
and
largely
India,
peaceful boundary with China. That I guarantee. I mean, I accept that as compared to even the Bangladesh border, where we've had incidents between the BDR and the BSF, and of course the volatile border with Pakistan. This has been a largely peaceful border with a boundary with China. But in spite of that, it's quite clear now that it's not exactly peaceful anymore with construction activity and things like that happening. So do you see India and China putting this in the back burner and going ahead with other cooperation and just like turning a blind eye to this?
Actually, the territorial dispute is bouncing back in every time, at every time when the leaders are meeting, and it is actually creating a lot of trouble in the bilateral relations. The incident that happened in Chumar If the reports about 1,000 troops that the PLA, People's Liberation Army, mobilized is correct, then I think this is a huge incident. Because in Samdurongchu incident in 1987, over 250 soldiers were mobilized by the PLA at that time. In Daulat Beg Oldi last year, when the Depsang Plains incident took place from April 15th to May 6th, they mobilized about 200 patrols in this region. In 1967, in Nathula Jelapla incident, only a few troops were mobilized at that point of time, which basically indicates if 1,000 troops are mobilized in Depsang Plains, then the Chinese want to actually grab the whole area and escalate the...
And did they really expect India to ignore it? And the fact that India did not and has sent in reinforcements, has it taken them by surprise?
Indeed. The fact that in the media statement, Prime Minister Modi mentioned mainly the territorial dispute and actually all the issues of concern for India in terms of the trade imbalance and a host of others. The fact that he started with the concerns indicated that these issues have actually been really bugging India.
Thank you for speaking with us.